Hello! Welcome back to another video. This morning I am planning on doing some 30-second maximum efforts. I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling motivated to do them. Even though 2 days ago we did the 10,000 meter elevation climbing challenge ride, whatever it was. I had a pretty steady day yesterday. Me and Charlie went for a spin around the mountain. So yeah, I didn't want to do much yesterday just to keep the legs moving. As typical, like to do a ride just very steady the day after such a big day, just to make sure that your body doesn't completely stiffen up and go useless. As sad as it sounds, I have coffee shop background noise. It's a YouTube video. Does anybody else do that? To try and make it sound like I'm in a cafe, so I've got some kind of background noise going. Okay, I'm actually breaking my own rule of recovery at the minute to bring you this next clip. That is still being in kit directly after finishing a workout. Okay, so obviously on the weekend we did the climbing challenge, 10,000 meters of climbing for 10,000 subscribers. Are you going to make a video kind of following up from explaining like what you ate, how you prepared for it, and things like that? Because I think for me, I didn't think it was like so much of a big deal, because the intensity for me was kept so low that, you know, there was never a point where I was contemplating I wasn't going to be able to finish it. Now, if I was to go harder and ride, you know, much closer to my FTP, then things would have started to get a little bit tricky. Lots of you jumped in for a couple of reps of the Alp on Zwift, but only a small number of us actually completed it and set out to actually complete it. Shout out to you guys, you know who you are. But I sent them messages then to kind of get an idea as to like how they found it, and turns out that the majority of them, just under 10 hours was their longest ever ride. I don't know if that was indoors or outdoors, but however it is, it's a long time. For the most part, they spent the majority of the time in zone 2. Obviously I spent most of my time, if not all of it, in zone 1. David spent 8 hours in zone 2. He was feeling good. He obviously had to eat more than me potentially. The biggest thing for them was the fueling, like eating and getting their head around like how much they'd actually have to eat. The biggest ride, so for this guy, the biggest ride was 7 hours. So being in the saddle for nearly twice as long as that for this challenge on the Alp was new territory. Really enjoyed it though. So according to him, he spent 13 hours at borderline zone 2, zone 3. So there was always going to be a point where, particularly like as he'd never kind of accumulated that amount of time in one go on the bike, there was always going to be a tipping point. So the rule of thumb is like, it's kind of the reason why I rode so steady and within myself, was because I knew that if I did go any harder, I'd have to eat more and I would get more muscle soreness, and it would have a knock-on effect on the next day and things like this. The thing is with fueling for a ride that big is you're almost always going to go into the unknown at some point, I think. You know, especially if you're riding at a certain intensity or above. And that intensity will be similar for a lot of people. It's going to be that upper zone 2 range. Because upper zone 2, you know, you can ride it. If you did a 4-hour ride at zone 2, happy days. 5 hours, 6 hours, happy days. You start going over 6 hours, even in zone 2, and there is going to be like quite a lot of accumulated fatigue there. You start going into zone 3 and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, now this is pretty big. You know, even if you did a 4-hour ride in zone 3, I know I'm throwing numbers out here, that's going to be like pretty tiring. All of a sudden you're spending 12 hours at that intensity. That's a lot. And you're doing basically the equivalent of what a lot of people do in a week, some people even 2 weeks, in like 12, 13 hours. So there's a lot going on. And fueling is only part of the equation. So Obviously, with cycling, it's a very easy sport to get involved in. If you want to do a massive ride, your fueling is probably going to be your biggest limiter. Like you can probably ride and ride and ride. You just get slower and slower, but you would still be able to ride, you know, especially if you're doing outside. You know, you have descents that you can freewheel. That's the magic of the bicycle. You don't have to pedal on a descent. The gut is something completely different, and training the gut, you train the gut every day. You know, when you have every single piece of food that you put in your body, you're training your body to deal with that item of food. Actually, speaking of which, this next couple of weeks I'm going to be changing the way I fuel for certain workouts. You may or may not like to see that, but your body will become naturally adapted to, say, you know, fasting. It will become naturally adapted to eating carbs around a workout, or, you know, not eating carbs around a workout. I know plenty of people who prefer to train fasted. I know lots of people who are on a high fat diet, low carb diet. The thing is, when you're doing a massive ride like this is, you know, people say if you ride a low enough intensity, you don't have to eat as much. For me, on that day on Saturday, I actually ate probably around, on average, about 40 grams of carbs an hour. Now, I obviously ate like 2 big meals, breakfast and lunch, which is unusual when you do a ride of that kind of length, because a lot of people just stick to bars and gels. But again, like if you're sticking to eating bars and gels, you're probably going to be experiencing, unless you're used to it, a bit of stomach distress. Practicing it is the #1 thing. So if you're going to do a 4-hour bike ride in a build-up to a bigger ride like this, you're highly likely to benefit from practicing ingesting those form of carbohydrates. So, you know, the gels and the bars and the energy drinks. Again, it depends the intensity of what you're riding at. But when it comes to, you know, a lot of you will want to, you know, you won't just want to finish, maybe you'll actually want to push the boat out a bit. And by pushing the boat out a bit, you'll have to get used to consuming, you know, upwards of 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour. And, you know, if you're going to do that for 12 hours just on bars and gels and, you know, sports energy products, your stomach may or may not like that. However you choose to do it, like, remember that the stomach is like a muscle, and you have to train it just like you train the body. You got to train the gut as well. And more often than not, nutrition makes or breaks people's epic rides, people's training sessions, people's race days. You know, I've been there in races, you know, really long races, 200 plus kilometer races that I've done in hot countries as well, where I've relied mainly on energy coming from liquid form, because you're trying to hydrate as well as fuel, and you don't really fancy, like, you know, a melted Snickers bar. That was during a stage race. I'd get like 2 days after that, my stomach could still be in bits. And that was down to mainly like not being used to it, but also you think about the heat, you know, and that plays a part in things of this nature. But for the most part, I didn't feel any different for this event than I have for many training sessions. It's probably a missed opportunity, but I wasn't going hard enough to really exploit carbohydrate intake and things like that. But I would thoroughly recommend, if you haven't done so already, really kind of think about how you fuel workouts and how you know, get this energy down, and lots of it as well, because, you know, you'd be amazed at how much you do have to get down when you're trying to fuel properly for things like this. And, you know, a really good website to find a lot of useful information on this is My Sport Science. Just punch it in Google, you'll find it. But yeah, some really useful information there. You know, I'm not a sports scientist, I'm not, you know, a dietitian, I don't play one. They don't quite realize how much of a difference practice nutrition and optimized nutrition can make on your performance. So I'll leave that with you. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.